I really hope you guys are ready for a wild ride on this one, because this video is likely going to be spicier than a jalapeno covered in sriracha, because we're going to dive into one of the most subjective matters in boating, and that is what are the top 6 boating manufacturers you should possibly consider buying a boat from. So go ahead and get that popcorn ready, sit back, and get ready to watch the comment section explode as we announce this list. Now, we tried to be as non-subjective as possible when making this list, and to show you how unbiased the list really is, if I was to give you an off-the-hip just kind of wish list of boats I'd love to own right now if money and space were not an object: the Regal SAV 38, Axopar 37, Royal Cat 296, and of course, who can forget the HCB Sueños 53, that vessel we boated a few years back as the #1 boat for beginners. Let's be honest, I mean, who wouldn't want this 53-foot, 1800 horsepower beast sitting in their stable? I mean, it's a beautiful boat, but let's be honest with each other, all the boats I just mentioned right there have a pretty hefty price tag and are fairly large vessels, and for most of us, probably aren't going to be the most practical boat purchase. So one of the first parameters we put into making this list was we really wanted to look at boat manufacturers who people were really actually going to probably buy boats from. And I'm going to be honest, that was my wish list. Not one of these manufacturers actually made the top 6. And I'm not going to lie, narrowing this down to 6 boating manufacturers was an exceptionally large task. This isn't the same as trying to narrow down the top 6 car manufacturers. Go to one of the old car websites and just take a quick look and look at the amount of manufacturers on there. On average, you're going to find around 60 manufacturers listed on those sites. But if you go to the boat sales websites and go to manufacturers, currently there are 1,700 plus manufacturers listed on those sites. So it's a massive task to try and narrow that number down to 6 from an unbiased perspective. So we did incorporate a few statistics, used a little science to try and narrow this list down some. One of the first things we actually looked at was actual boat sales. Who was selling the most boats? Now, that didn't automatically put these people on the list. We also dove into owner satisfaction to see what people were actually saying on forums who owned the vessels. And then one of the other things that we actually did lean into pretty heavily was boat search. What boats were being searched on the sales websites the most that people were actually looking to buy? I know that seems like an odd one to look at, but the reality is it's a very key one. If you buy a boat from a small manufacturer that's not being searched and you go to try and resell that boat, you're probably going to have a little bit of a tough time. But without any further delay, we're going to start the list with our first honorable mention, and that's going to be the boat maker Bertram. Now, the reason Bertram's getting an honorable mention versus being on the actual list is, as we mentioned, we were trying to focus on boat manufacturers that made boats that your average person could kind of buy, and Bertram really focuses more on that luxury sport fish market, which is going to push the price point beyond what we were really looking to do in this video. They have recently released some smaller models, but they are still a luxury boat manufacturer. The reason they're on the list was one of the things that really surprised me was they were one of the most searched boat manufacturers on the boat sales website, which at least made it worth an honorable mention on the list. So number 6 on our list is actually a tie. We needed to mention some of those pontoon and aluminum boat boys, and the tie goes between Low Boats and Ranger Boats. Both these manufacturers actually make pontoon boats and aluminum fishing boats. Now, yes, I know there are people shaking their head already, as there are many high-end pontoon boat makers out there that people may think are more deserving than this, but the fact that they made $120,000 pontoons may be the reason they got knocked off the list, as affordability was one of the things we looked at when we put this list together. And when we did our research, both these manufacturers seem to make a quality boat at an affordable price, landing them right where they are on the list. Now, if we had to give a slight edge to one of these manufacturers over the other, I would probably give the slight edge to Low, really putting them in the number 6 spot. The reason being, Ranger feels more like a cookie cutter boat. Sure, you may be able to select some colors and the outboard motor that goes on the back of the vessel, but other than that, your options were fairly limited, where Low seemed to have a wide variety of options you could do to make the boat your own. But I honestly don't believe you're going to go wrong if you're in the market for an aluminum vessel or a pontoon boat with either one of these manufacturers. If number 6 shocked you, number 5 is probably going to shock you a little more, because it shocked the crap out of me when it wound up where it did on the list, and that is going to be Wellcraft. I mean, nowhere in my thought process, even if I would have done a top 10 list, would I have thought Wellcraft would have wound up on this list. But after doing the research and looking at the statistics, it puts them in the number 5 spot, which really surprised me, because Wellcraft, let's be honest, kind of had its heyday in my mind back in the 1980s when it featured one of its its vessels in the popular TV show Miami Vice. Wellcraft saw a massive spike in sales during this time and even made a few Don Johnson edition offshore powerboats, really starting their lineage though as being known as an offshore powerboat racing company. In fact, Wellcraft even took this a step further and was one of the first companies to start making sports center consoles that are so popular today. The problem is they did this in the 80s and the 90s and we weren't quite ready for it yet. The company found themselves in financial trouble several times throughout the years and wound up changing hands a few times before finally being purchased by Beneteau in 2014. And being honest, this is where things kind of turned for Wellcraft and not necessarily for the better, because Beneteau was a large company and in that purchase they also acquired the name Scarab, which had been synonymously linked with Wellcraft and excellence in offshore racing for years, but Beneteau saw the value in the name and wound up taking that precious Scarab name and turned it into a line of lake-style jet boats, which I believe in the end actually wound up hurting the Wellcraft brand name as well, as it gave people a little bit of a cheapened appearance on that brand. But being honest, if you really do the research and look, Beneteau's actually done a pretty good job in the last several years trying to resurrect this brand back to its former glory. Boats like the Fisherman 302 and the 352 have both received multiple awards from their peers for being some of the best boats in their class. And if you haven't stepped on one of these boats, you really need to go check one out because they are beautiful vessels. But now, here come a few asterisks I'm going to add to this. 1. Do I really believe Wellcraft is the number 5 best manufacturer you can buy a boat from? The answer to that is no. Of course, I do not firmly believe that. But we're trying to be a little more inclusive with this list, so I'm really trying to focus on multiple types of boats as we do it. You'll see a little more about this once we get especially to number 1 and number 2. There are lots of honorable mentions that I probably would actually put in front of Wellcraft if I was looking just for a boat in general. But the Sports Center console market has become huge, and if you're looking for a Sports Center console, you really should at least give Wellcraft a look, unless you're really willing to go out there and spend $1 million on one of the premier brands making these. Now, if you haven't started with the hate mail in the comments yet, well, you're about to, because the number 4 brand actually incites anger in me as well, and it's going to be Bayliner. Stop! Don't leave the video just yet because I said the words. Let me try and explain a little bit. Bayliner may have one of the worst reputations in the marine industry. I mean, friends don't let friends buy Bayliners, right? Which is probably a little bit undeserved if I'm going to be honest. I mean, Bayliner is not your grandma's Bayliner. Back in the 80s and 90s, Bayliner produced a lot of cabin cruiser style boats, many of which can still be seen in marinas rotting away today, and I think a lot of Bayliner's negative impression came from during that era. But if you really look at Bayliner right now, it is nowhere near the same company it was 20 or 30 years ago. And if you really look at Bayliner for what it truly is today, this is why it winds up on this list. They actually make a pretty decent selection of boats. When Bayliner really started changing their game a few years back, I really think they only had 2 models, which were the VR and the Element. They have since added several more models, but what really puts them in a special place on this list is cost of entry. I mean, in a world where boats have gone through the roof on pricing, you can still find yourself into a Bayliner for a very modest price, and Bayliners anymore are actually pretty decent boats. No, they are not high-end luxury vessels, but they will get the job done, and they find a way to get you out on the water with a relatively nice price point, especially if you're the type of person who wants a new boat. For example, the Trophy 24, which they've just brought back into the Bayliner lineup, starts around $63,000. And if you go comp this to many other center console manufacturers out there, you're going to find a 24-foot boat like this will run you closer to $100,000 anymore. Now, if you're looking for a luxury vessel, Bayliner is definitely not going to be that, and you're going to need to look elsewhere, but most people who are looking for a budget-friendly boat probably aren't looking for that. They're looking for an affordable way to get into a new boat that's going to be reliable and have some fun on the water, and if that's you, Bayliner, as much as I hate to say it, may be something you want to look at. Now, fortunately, number 3 will probably be the last controversial pick on our list. Number 1 and number 2, I promise you, are much more palatable manufacturers, but number 3 is going to be our best all-around family boat, and that is going to be the Yamaha lineup of boats. Yes, I know, it's a jet boat, and for some reason, many people have a negative impression of jet boats, so much so I even made a video a few years back kind of debunking many of the myths around jet boats that are out there that just really aren't true. And I really do have quite a bit of experience on these types of vessels. My family has been a 2-boat family for almost 6 years. The reality is, if you live in a coastal area, I don't know that there's any one boat out there that will satisfy every need, so we continuously keep around a 30-foot center console, and then we have usually around a 24-foot family boat. Now, we keep this smaller boat around because we find that the things the family wants to do is typically a little more accessible with a little smaller boat, so such as docking at restaurants, making it to their favorite sandbars and things like that are a whole lot easier without having the 30-foot center console with us. For the last several years, this vessel actually has been a Yamaha AR240. And I'm gonna be honest, my family loves that boat so much that I highly think that I'll probably always have to have one in the stable. Some of the special features about the Yamaha jet boats of course are going to be that jet drive. With nothing hanging below the boat, it's one less thing to worry about. But they are very versatile boats as well. I've even taken mine to the Bahamas before and several other family vacations. Because it's a smaller, lighter boat, it's easier to tow around than the 30-foot center console, making it something that we can take around and explore other waterways with. One of the other big advantages of this boat having a jet drive is going to be cost. You're going to get a little more bang for your buck out of this vessel than you would a vessel with traditional propulsion. Basically, a 24-foot, 6-inch Yamaha boat in their 250 class is going to start with twin 180 horsepower motors in the vessel. In order for you to get into a 25-foot boat with twin outboard 150s, you're going to be over six figures, where Yamaha starts at around $67,000. And one of the other big advantages with Yamaha over most of the other companies out there is going to be that bow to stern coverage. Yamaha's making the propulsion system, Yamaha's making the hull, which is going to mean at warranty time, if you have any issues, you're only dealing with one company. So if you're looking for a good all-around family boat, I definitely would take a look at Yamaha. Definitely a great bang for your buck. Now, as we're talking about affordable boats, number 2, we're going to talk about our best mid-tier boats that are still affordable to most people who are trying to get out on the water, and our winner in this category is going to be Sea Ray. Now, there are a lot of honorable mentions in this one. Regal, Chaparral, Cobalt are all great brands that actually probably could have beat several of the other brands we've obviously placed on this list. Now, I know it's tough to call Sea Ray a mid-tier manufacturer. I mean, if you're looking at a 25-foot deck boat from Sea Ray anymore, you're probably pushing close to six figures, which once again brings that Yamaha back to being such a great value. But if you step on a Yamaha and then go step on the Sea Ray, you will immediately see why there's such a price difference, as the Sea Ray is just going to feel like a much higher quality vessel in the materials being used. Now, Sea Ray wound up beating the competitors we mentioned as an honorable mention based on the parameters we talked about in the beginning of the video. We looked at boat sales, owner satisfaction, reliability, and of course boat search. And Sea Ray did beat out most of its competitors in most of the categories, but one of the biggest reasons I think Sea Ray is a step above those other competitors is going to be owner inclusion. And it's fitting that the first time we've talked about this is at the number 2 spot. Sea Ray does a fantastic job of making his owners feel like they're part of the Sea Ray family. Sea Ray does multiple events throughout the year, trying to bring its owners together, creating a community. They also encourage many of their dealers to do these types of events as well, which is going to create a huge owner satisfaction and retention rate. When many of these owners are looking to upgrade to their next boat, they're still only going to look at Sea Ray because they're going to want to join these events and stay a part of the community that they love. But the other reason Sea Ray is at the number 2 spots, they build a high quality product with an extensive lineup. I mean, if you're looking for a boat, Sea Ray's probably got something for you. This, of course, is going to bring us to our number 1 on our list, and this one's not going to be a surprise. It is going to be Boston Whaler. But before we dive into the Boston Whaler subject, we're going to talk about our honorable mention here, and that is going to be Grady White. This really was a tough choice. Not necessarily between Boston Whaler and Grady White, but man, if I was really making like a top 10 or a top 6 of all manufacturers, Grady White probably would have been on the list. I mean, Grady White makes an absolutely fantastic boat, and the categories we were using to rank these things in, they ranked high in all of them. Once again, probably would have been on an overall list, but Boston Whaler is going to take the edge, and the reason they do is owner inclusion again. Nobody does this better than Boston Whaler. Boston Whaler probably has the largest owner fan base in the world, and it's because Boston Whaler does a great job of communicating with its owners and doing everything it can to get them involved in community Boston Whaler events, really making Boston Whaler's owners feel like they are part of a Boston Whaler family. So much so that Boston Whaler owners really become attached to this brand. I mean, if you ask a Boston Whaler owner right now what their next boat's going to be, 9 out of 10 times you're probably going to get a response that says it's going to be another Boston Whaler, or they're not even interested in another boat, which is surprising because everybody gets 2-foot-itis. Boston Whaler really does build a quality product. If you haven't been on one recently, do yourself a favor and go step on one. They really do have a massive lineup as well, which means you're probably going to find something that will fit your lifestyle and your needs. Now, if I do have to knock Boston Whaler in one part, that's going to be the cost to play part. They really are right on the edge of the affordability standard I was trying to use when I was creating this list. The best way I can describe it, at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show this year, I actually fell in love with the 28 outrage. But at over $300,000 for a 28-foot boat, it really does make you question whether it's what you want to get into, when many other boats in that category are sub $200,000. But cost to play is more than just your initial cost. So basically, cost to play is going to be your depreciation and loss on a boat. So if you buy a boat at a certain price and I sell it at a certain price later, that's my real cost to play, and Boston Whaler might actually fit really good in this category. If you can find a quality used Boston Whaler at a decent price, you likely can play with this boat for 4 or 5 years and sell it for exactly what you paid for it. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button, and we hope to see you on the next one.